to me, the sacred feminine ignores the story and sees the soul, which means that she's self-sourcing like cosmic universal energy so she doesn't get burnt out because she has no expectations and there's no egoic involvement in her caregiving. You know what I mean? Because I know some people, and I've been this way too, is like, but I'm giving, I'm doing all the things, and I'm helping, and I'm helping, and I'm helping.
In order to receive.
You burn out because you have an expectation, actually. Your ego is still very much attached. So in all of your care, you can't hold endless energy and boundless energy because you're not caring for yourself as appropriately or giving over the expectations to the higher source. You know what I mean? I know a lot of women that fall into that. And then conversely, they do the polarity thing, Brittany, which is like, fuck this. I'm going to take care of myself. It's self-care time. Like all y'all are on your own. I got to take care of myself and I'm empowered and I'm self. And it's like, there's the ping pong again. Like, yeah. Can we be service to others or do we have to be service to self? Or can we find a way to mutually merge these things so it doesn't have to be,
I think so.
Here,
yeah,
here.
Balance it.
I think if you find time to care, you can care for yourself and nurture yourself. Like you said, self-sourcing, and then you feel fulfilled and you have more energy to give.
Yeah.
Not easy stuff, like simple, but not easy.
Yeah, it's a balance of the two. It's got to be the balance of the two. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. You better learn how to balance that shit because it can't just be love and light. And I know all this like awesome freaking study, book learning, esoteric type of information. And I got that shit down pat. That's awesome. However, you better know how to learn that. You better know how to like understand and how to apply that as a resource in the physical. We are the physical artistic expression of God or spirit or high self or source or whatever the hell you want to call it. Doesn't really matter what you call it. How I see it, but we are the physical expression of that, and we have to be able to understand how to apply this information in the physical realm because otherwise there's no point. So that is the point to experience in the physical and experience. And I think when we drop into these poorly designed bodies, we set ourselves a list of parameters of like marks we need to hit, like a checklist, and we either hit them or we don't hit them. And every time we do drop into one of these bodies, then it's a whole new set of parameters, or maybe we just keep repeating it so we get it. But that is kind of a little bit off of our topic, but you guys are amazing.
It's the balancing of the brain as well, and the masculine and feminine. And so when we're going to be balanced in the outer world, there's that correspondence to our inner world, right? So there's always work to be done inside, and then to be able to step outside and do the work in, a balanced way, right?
Yeah.
And
you guys
try and practice.
It's that like external and versus internal locus of control also. And when I was thinking about the food topic, I was thinking about that as a theme too. And I think that it applies to what we're talking about here. It's like really doing the inner work to know, figure out what is your true potential, where your power comes from and how and where it ends, where we where the boundary is, right, of our of how we treat people, how we we have influence, right? We're interconnected. So understanding the internal versus the external aspects of things, right?
Yeah, exactly. And you guys are amazing, and that's why I wanted to create this group, the Girls Club. And to start on that note, officially, welcome to the Girls Club number 6. 6 episodes, and hopefully many more to come. And this month we are talking about food and the healing and generating a healthy relationship with food and medicine. And this is kind of a part 2 to last month. So we're just going to go over this. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so screen is loading. Okay, so you can see the notes again?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. That'll do. So, healing and generating a healthy relationship with food and medicine. This month, let's talk about how food is used in culture as conditioned habits and what happens when we do not take care in our actions about how we use food. So food has become a staple emotion that connects to our need to be with others, and in some unhealthy ways, such as our need to fill unchecked emotional voids within our lives. Food is used as a way to get people together for the most part, rather than properly understanding how food is used for nourishment and medicine. Today, healthy food is too expensive and unhealthy processed food is cheap. This makes it difficult for anyone to put too much thought into any concept of healthy eating, or, God forbid, as medicine to maintain health and create health. Food is no longer looked at as the key to health. It should be used as. We have taken for granted this special gift. Nowadays, everyone has the solution to healthy food, and yet almost nobody is healthy. Even trained dietitians who train in medical school struggle to create something truly healthy for a patient's diet. Many dietitians have no real ability in creating a healthy and structured diet. They are trained by the establishment that exists, and in my opinion, this can be questionable training at best. Not enough of nature's knowledge is given any consideration throughout the gain knowledge of man's intervention. So, step out of that for a minute. So, just starting with that, I just wanted to, as like a basis for starting this particular part of the topic, that when I say the establishment, I mean the main system that we have as far as our medical institution, not saying that it's 100% evil or bad or malicious or whatever, but from my own personal experiences and dealing with it a lot in 40 years, I can tell that it is not up to par as what it was originally intended to be at. And it's very difficult to be fully in there's like this one side of the pendulum or the other. You're either full, there's this not enough balance between what is good for us, like the intervention of what we need to put into our knowledge base, and the natural components of what we should allow in. And I've had, you guys know I've had a lot of struggle with food and healthy eating, but I understand now that a lot of this comes from the issues that I've had emotionally, psychologically. And this is a problem I think more people have than they actually either understand, think about, view as, or even accept. And it's like one side of the pendulum or the other. It's like either you're full on medical, worshiping the medical authority as it is, because it's basically taking the place of God and all of knowledge, or you're on the way on the other side of the pendulum where you're all 100% nature, which is not necessarily bad if you don't have any like
we develop medicine for other reasons too, so it's not a perfect
thing. And it's like we've got to understand, like, even in the nature aspect of it, you've got to understand the medicine that's within nature, and man's intervention helps to enhance that. So that being said, I'd like to know what you guys think about that.
I have ideas. I'm writing down one really quick. Well, I'm just going to start with where you were talking about why do people eat? And there's so many reasons why people eat, and you could say, why do we eat? Well, we don't eat. Ultimately, we might die, right? We're not going to have the fuel to do what we need to do. But is that really why people eat what they eat most of the time? Especially when you ask why do people eat what they eat, or when they eat, or how they eat. Those factors really aren't usually about survival or even about health, right? Because food has such a psychological component. Optimally, we eat for like the highest functioning of our like whole self, mind, body, spirit, because food has an impact on all of that. But I think that people have disconnected that role of food, and that's not how our culture really promotes food. It's promoted, like you said, Sarah, through so many, we talked about holidays and family gatherings. So, people eat for emotional reasons, social reasons, cultural reasons, convenience, even spiritual reasons, maybe not eating something because of that, a religion. And then, what's familiar, what feels secure or safe or known, because that's very connected to our emotion. And then there's food addictions because food is so powerfully reinforcing, right? So, and then there's things that are in food, some natural and some artificial, that add and fuel to addiction and to that pleasure, the heightened desire to have, to feel really good and want more, like fats and sugars and caffeine and different chemicals. So I thought those were important things to share. It becomes complicated.
Yeah. And so, yeah, instead of it being about nurturing the individual that we are, the spiritual, physical, the body, instead of it being about that, and letting food be our medicine, we're portraying it's like all about what's easy, what feels good, what's what. And like some people really have a difficult time in connecting with other people unless it's like there's some like unless they have like the safeguard of food, unless it's like going to lunch, going to coffee, going to dinner, go to a family meeting or or family event or something. It's surrounded with, oh well, it's food, so we have something in common, rather than just connecting to people on a real level, a real adult level.
It's like a proxy nurturance almost too. Like it's like a fake kind of a nurturing instead of, and maybe it's the desire for true nurturing that then gets put on food,
Yeah, it's almost like a psychological crutch. So I'm not saying people shouldn't do those things and meet up their family and do like Thanksgiving. I love Thanksgiving. It's one of my favorite kind of holidays because I don't know, just that it's always kind of great. And big things like that, family reunions, like these are all good things to have in your life. But to make it a thing where the only reason why you're connecting with those people is because there's a meal involved, that is kind of bordering into the unhealthy spiritual side of it, I think. So, if Brittany or Stephanie, if you guys have something you want to add to that bit, or not, we can.
I think I'd like to just add real quickly is that I think I'd like to just have us acknowledge the very, very obvious. And this is something that we have to do a lot, and it can become very tedious. Let's just say we got to eat every day, 2 to 3 times a day. And I can't tell you how many times in my past I've thought like, isn't there just a ball I can put in my mouth to like get what I need
Does
to
it
go?
all.
So
I've thought
yeah, so
that.
I think that for me, this discussion and thinking about this topic revolves around, even though this is can become redundant and we can really lose consciousness or not have any consciousness at all about how and what we eat and when we eat and who we're with, because it's just we're always doing it. I think for me, it's like, how do I find this balance to remember anything I put in my mouth is an opportunity to connect to the sacred within me and nature and something else. So it's like, how do I take something tedious and still feel grateful and appreciative and understand the sacredness anytime I put something in my mouth? And because we're humans, we can take that for granted. And it's something that I'm trying to just constantly remind myself is, even though it's tedious and sometimes I do it for a myriad of unhealthy reasons, right? Tired, lack of time, emotional, put this in my mouth, put this in my mouth. Like, how do I create an overall all encompassing healthy relationship with the fact that I get to put stuff in my mouth?
Yeah.
I love that you mentioned all those points because I have no grounds to stand on where it comes to food, advising anybody of anything. I may have mentioned it on some of our past shows, but I was vegan for almost 6 years, and it ended up being a really unhealthy thing for me and for my family. And I was in a very, very unhealthy relationship at that time. I actually neglected my health for to the point of having a psychological breakdown. It's one of the steps that happens after starvation. Before you die of starvation, your mind will snap. And I had that happen to me. And so I've been kind of easing my way back into health. I have a high pain tolerance, and there were times where I would just ignore the pains, and just deal with them. And so I'm having to kind of reintegrate back into like, what do I even think is healthy? Like I can go without food, so having to make myself eat, integrate convenience and what it even is health food nowadays. And so we're raising our own meat. We have our own eggs and stuff like that. So I'm kind of relearning and re-exploring enjoying food. Like, how can I make something healthy and also convenient to fit our lifestyle? And I love the point that you made. It's an opportunity to connect like with the creator, because I'm definitely reestablishing my sense of faith and connection with that. And yeah, I take a lot from these kind of discussions from you guys. There's tons that I've learned, but I haven't been the best example to speak on these things other than sharing my experience in case other people relate. Um, but yeah, that's kind of where I stand on this topic, and I gain a lot by hearing your guys' perspective on these things, perspectives.
I'm glad you
Yes,
said.
well.
I'm glad you guys brought that up too, because I've lost over the years of my own medical issues. I've lost my perspective. I've lost my faith in food and how to consume properly, and was never really set on to like a good pathway of how to develop a good relationship with that stuff spiritually, or how to use it for good in good ways. It's always just been about survival for me, which is, I don't think, a very healthy way psychologically to look at food. Like, to think of food as, oh, well, you gotta eat, you gotta do this, you gotta blah blah blah, and but you also feel that need, like you want to connect to other people, so you just mesh the two up haphazardly without any thought or care, and it kind of puts all the important stuff, I think, on the wayside there, kind of shelves it up. And I'm starting to develop more of a healthy understanding and appreciation spiritually for food, and how to consume that in a way that is less harmful, and I don't feel like I'm not pressured. I don't have the feeling that I'm pressured into food has to be this whole community event. It could just be a private matter that I deal with, and handle it that way. It can be community events sometimes, but it doesn't have to be, because I want to connect people in a more authentic, actual way. Like, I don't want people just to like hang out with me just because, I can eat. It seems so disconnected to me. So yeah, great points, guys.
I really love that point you made, Stephanie, about connecting to the sacred and to God through the act of eating, and when you stop and you really think about what you're eating and what's like natural versus not, and how that feels in your body, there's like a self-discovery that we can go through, through eating. I think it's actually one of those ways that we very tangibly have an opportunity to like get to know ourselves, because food is like connected to so much of who we are and how we feel and how we think and our energy and all of that. And we're all so unique that I don't think there's any one answer for everyone. So that's really important. And so you're not going to always find the answers outside of yourself. And the more that you're looking for an expert or, something external to guide you, your own, there's a cap, right, to how much you'll really know about what your true best relationship with food is. And it's like that going inward and a living experiment in a way. And I think that idea of connecting with nature, though, is, and even not necessarily with the most natural food, but this idea of soul food, right? And I do think that it's like the polarities of really left brain kind of, you should only eat what's nutritionally right and morally optimal and blah, 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 right? And then the other side is really very much about our soul connection to the experience with food, or the beauty of food, which I would love to experience more. And I love it when I'm like around people that cook, like that have that ability, that special magic around food, because I don't really have it. I'm very like kind of pragmatic. I'm kind of more like what you described, where I'm like, oh shit, I gotta eat something, like, and I want it to be good, like, oh, what the fuck do I do? I didn't plan well. And so it was like how to discipline myself, and it has this kind of sometimes a frustration. And I just want to be taken care of a little, like, could someone cook for me? Could someone nurture me? It's just an interesting thing. And I know what I find, like, because I've gone on a journey of like really wanting to know what the optimal diet is. And so when I was on maternity leave with my third child, I like contemplated this, and I was led to like this raw foodist, and I started to do a lot of raw food, but I never was 100%. But I was like 80, 70%, 75% maybe for a while, and I had to figure that out. But I've come to realize that I figured out what sort of works for my body, and I know what that is, but then I struggle sometimes. Why aren't I doing it all the time? Like, I'll do really good for a while, and then I'll be like, I'm not doing it. And why am I resisting, like, doing this that I know makes me feel the best? And it's this weird thing around food and self-care and self-love, I think, that gets all tied in.
Yeah. I think that, go on, Brittany, or Stephanie.
Oh,
I was just going to say, we're going to go off on another tangent here before Sarah even gets into the next thing. But Leslie, I hear everything you're saying. And, optimally, every single one of us here requires something different right now, dependent and contingent on where we're at, not just physically. But I've also discovered that my diet, I did the route Leslie you were talking about, is I was a very insecure, let's just go to the point. I was a very insecure, perfectionistic young lady, and I was a dancer, and I thought I was overweight, and I had an eating disorder for quite a while. And so I got a lot of my information from my experience as well. And, I tried to master every single diet. I was vegan. I was vegetarian for close to 16 years, and I was vegan for about 5. That's ironically when I got very, very sick. But years later, really understanding that how intertwined your consciousness is with what you require, and how different states of awareness beckon for different foods to be integrated for specific spaces that you're at. And if you look at food as energetically, it's the first chakra. It's the root chakra, the first one that's cultivated when you're in your mother's womb. Up to about 6 months of age is when this energy center is created. It has everything to do with your relationship with the feminine energy. And ironically, Leslie, you were saying, like, sometimes I wish somebody could like give to me so I could receive, but often if that root chakra in our energy is dysregulated, if we're overworked, busy, have issues with our own survival, fight or flight, hypervigilance, if we're in that mode, we don't have time to have a sensual, sensate relationship with cooking and eating. To really, like, I'm thinking about 9.5 weeks when they're like feeding each other in that movie, and it's very sensual. And I mean, it's like, who has time for that, for that kind of stuff with food? So it's an interesting relationship between food and pleasure and time and nourishment. And do I deserve good food? Do I have time to make myself, do I have time to go to the farmer's market and nourish myself with a homemade stew? And it's just so interesting how intertwined I think our awareness, our consciousnesses, and our traumas are with our relationship to food. And I wanted to just read something to you guys really quick. In a study of 501 patients with eating or disordered eating, 84% report having experienced at least one or more types of traumatic events in their life. Among the individuals with disordered eating, those have a history of trauma or significantly have higher rates of comorbid psychiatric disorders, depression, anxiety, substance abuse. 208 women with anorexia, 71% reported having at least one or more traumatic event. It goes on and on. So basically, disordered eating for women almost always comes back to some sort of trauma. So recovering my eating disorder, and then ironically, like Sarah, flipping a polarity into a chronic health condition where I was in kidney failure on dialysis, where I could not eat for the life of me a lot of healthy foods. You can't have potassium or phosphorus when you're in kidney failure. So I couldn't eat fruit. I couldn't eat salads. No problem. I couldn't eat healthy food. So I went from being a totally controlling person with an eating disorder around what went into my mouth to you have to snack on cookies and cakes now because you can't have potassium. Like my brain was like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. So this inextricable link between trauma and how we eat, I think it is like what we need to address before we just throw a diet at somebody, like before we say, this is what you should eat, or you should be vegetarian, or you should eat this, and this is the healthiest way to eat. The first and foremost question should be, what is your relationship with food? And do you have any traumas around feeling safe, feeling nourished? What is your relationship with your primary caregiver? Like, these are all what form our relationship with food. And if we get real locked in to one way is right, I feel that that's a clear indication that we are locked in a bubble of consciousness. And for me, I thought vegetarian was the way for a very, very long time. I did it for 16 years. I got deathly ill. Then I incorporated, Sarah, like a lot of fish and things like that. Then later on, with my history of autoimmune conditions, I've realized that there is emerging formidable evidence that more carnivore diet, because there's a high sensitivity to chemicals that are being sprayed and stuff in the soil for people with autoimmune. So I think you have to explore for where you're at in your development and be willing to change,
Exactly. Absolutely. There's no room for a comfortable standpoint and comfortable experimentation, because you've got one side of the spectrum or the other. And it's like nobody can kind of realize that we're not all biologically the same. We're not all necessarily spiritually the same.
Yes.
The only thing that makes us completely 100% the same is that we are all connected by the same source of,
Yes.
that which set things in
Thank you,
motion,
Debbie.
whatever you want to call it. But
Thank
we
you. Watch out for
are
the rooster.
we are individual, and our biologies all work individually, even if the basics are the same.
Yeah.
The details change. And that's
Such a good
because
point.
that's what nature does. Nature is fluid. It's got basic principles, and then, like nature likes to do, it throws you, a curveball once in a while, and you get like a genetic mutation in the human genome, or you get, you spot some kind of weird thing that doesn't necessarily, oh, that's not nature, that's not real at all, but it is real because it's happening, and nature does that. So there's no there's no comfortable place to be, like, there's no comfortable allowance for people to experiment with their biologies and how they operate with food. And I feel like this is why I brought up dietitians, especially dietitians who operate in the medical establishment, is because they're learning this way instead of learning that way, and broadening their view with it. And I think with dietitians in the system, their hands are tied in a lot of ways. And they're not given the full body of, food knowledge and education that they should with that kind of stuff. So they're just not given really all that information unless they go off looking for it on their own. And it's difficult to process any kind of information with this subject unless you have kind of all of the avenues and you're willing to branch out and hear more of the avenues. I mean, like, I myself, I like the concept of being a full vegetarian, but I just can't be. So, like, I've had to, over many, many years, 4 decades of my life, I've had to come up with a way where I am not, like, over consuming, because I have this flight or fright response to my experience with my own health trauma. And I've had to overcome that. And I know other people can do this as well, which is why I bring it up, and find a way that I can sustain myself in a healthy way where I'm not over consuming and I'm not just, destroying things for the sake of my own fear of death or whatever it is, people, how they want to relate to that. So,
Sarah, I just want to say something to that real quick. And I think it's important for all of us to hear. We all know this already, but we have to find what works best for us. And if we are consciously doing that process, nobody has the right to shame us for what we may need at a particular time. Again, it's like I hear certain groups proselytize certain diets, and part of me, I feel like they're trying to shame other people. And this is a low level of consciousness when you are shaming other people. But you know what I realized? And again, this is me trying to not get high on my own supply, is something within me wants to say, oh, I've been there, I've done that. And I've done the same thing that you've done. I've tried to shame other people who are in it, like, been there, done that 16 years ago. And now I'm at a different place. So I think the important thing is that I personally find that vegetarians are some of the most judgmental people I've met, next to Christians. So, like,
vegans too, they're right there.
Yeah, like
it's like a cult.
Yeah, it is a cult, and that's the thing. Is if you're coming from a place of love, before you proselytize your process, come at somebody with love and maybe give them information. But you can't just shame somebody for not being a vegetarian. You have no idea what's going on within them.
Shame someone into health either.
Right.
It's like a really unhealthy thing.
It says more about them.
Feel bad.
Yeah, it says more about the shamer than the person perceivably not following whatever it is that they're saying they should.
Yeah, highlights for me how food has been a center of control, like something that's been used to control people right from birth, almost like these debates on, do you feed an infant on demand, or do you put them on a schedule? Do you give them breast milk, or do you, like, and so food is often for babies and toddlers the thing where they can assert some control
Exactly.
and personal, impact. Like they can say, no, I'm not going to open my mouth.
Yeah.
I'm going to spit it out. I'm going to throw it on the ground, right? That's like a developmental stage of like identifying your own like selfhood, separation. And in a way, food connects to, social oppression. How hard is it to buy, how expensive, who can afford to buy organic foods if you can't grow it yourself, right?
Exactly.
And
this is why it's been getting so difficult for people.
Yeah, processed foods are the cheapest, the easiest, going to the dollar store, get your ramen noodles, like it's people's survive to eat, right? Let's give them bread, just give them bread, right? Let's take the grain supplies away, like back in feudal times or whatever, kings and, they control people with their access to even basic material to cook, to make food and survive. So it's like, here we are in these weird control battles with like passionate, overly extreme mindsets around food, shaming other people, right? It's very dysfunctional. And I think, really loosening up that stance of moral judgment, even though there's a logical moral argument around first principle, right? And yet this issue is so complex. And I really liked what you were saying, Sarah, about even though we share like a basic physiology, the details of our DNA are very different. And I really think that, that if you were raised generations and generations of your people, not eating or drinking cow's milk or some in a certain way, it's going to check. If all you eat is bread, right? It's going to change your what you're born with in your own physiology to some degree. Like not all of us are going to be able to tolerate certain things, or we're going to have differences in our own bodies that we're born with. I would imagine.
I've learned the same thing. At one point I was selling, it was like an MLM company. So I don't know how y'all feel about that. It went down under. But I was selling some minerals. It was fulvic acid. And I basically had learned something that was later supported in another book that I have called Taking Charge of Your Fertility, that we all have different mineral reserves, especially based on what was your own mother's mineral reserves when she was pregnant with you. And that's why we all have different levels of minerals. Now, I'm a perfect health practitioner, so I don't have any authority, I should say. But it's something else that I've learned. And so I love that you guys had mentioned, easing up a little bit and kind of enjoying food. And I've kind of done that too, where I've just kind of tried to enjoy eating again. Like instead of, I've never had an issue being overweight, but I've had issues being underweight. And for like the first time in years, I'm able to put a good healthy amount of weight on my body. I'd still like to gain another like 5 or 10 pounds, but it's actually sticking. So I feel so much better. And now I'm still kind of trying to figure out, what is actually healthy. And I'm actually considering going to the medical field and doing a blood test and stuff like that, and maybe an allergy test to see where I'm at. So maybe that could help give me a little bit more guidance. Because I love to cook and I like to eat too, but then I can deeply relate to like, oh man, well, these days I'm super busy, so I just need something quick, easy. And I think we could all benefit from looking at ourselves on a personal level and kind of having that conscious awareness, kind of like Stephanie was saying about, we all, or maybe it was you, Leslie, or both, we all kind of have a sense of like what works for us. And I think it's important for us to explore that and listen.
Mm-hmm. And if we have an unhealthy relationship with food, we were talking earlier about I was saying years ago, I had this burning question of, do we need to polarize to heal?
Yeah.
Do we need to polarize from one behavior completely to the other extreme in order to find some sort of healthy balance? And in some cases, I've experienced that sometimes it psychologically helps. So when I was coming out of having an eating disorder, I was extremely underweight, extremely unhealthy. And, I wasn't eating fries and, I was eating healthy, but I was eating so little that it was psychic, it was psychological. That when I truly started to recover, which for me happened during a very extensive yoga practice, I didn't see a therapist, but I had a great teacher who really helped me with loving my body. And in fact, healing our relationship with food, they say, should come bottom up. You should do it somatically. You shouldn't you shouldn't just do top down or cognitive theory. That actually, when it comes to healing the body, you should work with the body. You should do somatic. And so for me, I have a photograph of myself when I put a piece of pizza in my mouth. It was that much of a big deal to put a piece of pizza up to my mouth and eat a whole piece of pizza that my mother took a photograph of me. It was that much of a big deal. So for me, it's like I needed to give myself permission to enjoy and start to cultivate a healthier relationship with food before I could come back into something more organic and natural. So again,
that's where I'm at.
If you're hyper focusing all the time on anything, you can't create some sort of healthy, balanced relationship. So I had to let myself enjoy a little bit before I could find that balance.
And I think it's important for people to understand that you have to have a certain amount of self-care and self-love and self-appreciation for who you are, and just be like, okay, don't put so much, for anybody who listens to this, don't put so much pressure on yourself to eat a certain way because this, that, or the other thing is in your environment and you support this or that. It's like supporting one type of ideology and going full hog, and because it says one thing, everything has to be exactly the same. It doesn't have to be that way. And it doesn't have to be this. I mean, to think of it like that, it's almost like religious. And it doesn't have to be a mode of flight or fight, which in my case, that's how it was with me, where it's very panicky, unstable, emotion. I didn't grow up with that kind of sense. I was just consuming without any kind of real connection or knowledge or anything. It was just about survival. And with some people, it's been about, like you guys were saying, it's attached to religious aspects. It can be attached to traumatic events. It can be attached to, I want to connect with my family and friends, but I only do that with food. I only know how to do that with food. So yeah, it doesn't have to be that. It can just be about taking the time, no matter how long it takes, however many years it takes, no matter how many transitions you have to go through to figure out how you're going to consume food, and understand that everything that we consume in our body, every single molecule of anything that we put into our body, is something that our bodies are going to react to, either negatively or positively. There's a consequence to everything. So finding that balance, really, it's important to start with that. And I think that is the bottom. You start at the bottom, and you start with the fact that you're here for a reason. You're here. You have to have self-care, and you've got to find whatever the balance is with your biology that works and keeps you in a good, healthy physical state, so that you can advance yourself spiritually and psychologically and emotionally in all the right healthy ways. You got to find both of them. You got to understand how to care for the tree. You got to be able to know how to nurture the tree and care for the tree and love that tree, and that tree, that understand that tree is part of a bigger system. But you got to understand the tree. And if you can't understand the tree, then it doesn't matter how much you understand the forest. And that's just how I've been viewing it. So yeah.
I just want to quickly say to you about the tree is the tree does rely on aspects of nature for its sustenance as well. So there's a study that I forget what it's called, but there was a famous study where a double-blind study where rats were fed cholesterol, and one controlled group was fed the cholesterol, and the guy just came in and threw him the food and then left. And then the other group, the guy came in and talked to the rats and, oh, I love you. You look so good today. Da, da, da. Well, don't you know that the body processed the cholesterol completely different? So I think the important part, for, at least for me, is really, again, this inextricable link between how you think about food and how it processes too. So you might have a little more leniency and not have to be so controlling with your food if you had a better attitude about yourself and the food from the jump, because it does.
That makes sense.
Food processes differently in your body depending on your mindset.
It's fascinating. It really matches to what Melissa Sell was saying on our Dissolving the Divide episode on German New Medicine, where she said the most important thing is to be at peace with how you choose to eat, with what you do, because it's the unresolved conflict, the beating yourself up with perfectionists, like, self-criticism, or feeling like you just messed up and you're no good, like all of this psychological stuff that leads to us emotionally not being at peace, but also our body will reflect that and ultimately like create a physiological condition or health issue, right? There's this inextricable link, really. And so finding ways to be at peace with our imperfection, right? And to not just stay in the intellect and judgment, but to also be in the experience, like we were talking about in the beginning, the experiential and an acceptance of our messiness, of our just like individual journeys. And I think that is bringing the feminine in, that love, that care.
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't know if you guys know the chakra system. I don't know why I'm bringing this up and referring to this, but it was such a powerful map of understanding the dichotomy between the different chakras, and some are masculine, some are feminine. So what you were saying, Leslie, is that the first chakra is a masculine, the root chakra is a masculine energy chakra, all around nourishment, home, survival, your roots, your lineage. Do you feel safe in your body? Do you feel safe in your environment? Or are you hijacked in hyper or hypo arousal and you're imbalanced? The second chakra is a feminine chakra, which is, that is the art and the ability energetically to go with the flow. It has everything to do with your fluid systems within your body and your ability to receive. So if that masculine isn't in balance and feels safe in his skin, not to be perfect, not to be too much, she can't come in to embrace the reception and to go with the flow if she's hijacked in the first chakra. So it shows this beautiful link between the right left brain, the masculine and feminine energy. Is if you don't feel safe, you can't relax to receive. So
oh my God,
so
my mind is blowing. So I've never thought to overlay the genders. I've never actually looked at the chakra system, but I studied it super in depth. I'm certified at Reiki 1 and 2, so I'm familiar with them. I've never looked at it like that, and it makes complete sense. Like what you just said, with the feminine energy not feeling safe enough to receive. I've observed that without looking at the chakras, but I'm going to have something else to explore because that is an exciting new perspective to look through.
You can't have a healthy relationship with everything food has to offer. If you're hijacked in your first chakra, I mean, food can be delicious, amazing, sensual, like chefs coming to cook and the truffle oil, like it can be a whole amazingly pleasurable experience. And that's what the second chakra is the ability to receive pleasure in life. And if you're hijacked in fight or flight, you don't feel safe, you have to usurp to get pleasure because you can't source it yourself.
Yeah,
that makes so much sense. Is it every other chakra that's masculine, feminine, masculine, feminine? That's kind of what I thought when I started look at it like that.
Yeah, 2, 4, 6 parlay off of 1, 3, 5, and it's always him building the foundation for her to receive.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
I love that.
That's awesome.
You know, and that first chakra base is where the control dynamics would be too, right?
The positive aspects of again, because they have two, like there's a continuum. So the positive elements of the first chakra are feeling grounded, feeling safe in your body, being able to nourish yourself appropriately, feeling safe in your family system, feeling like you have a home, having a healthy relationship with those who are close to you. But then if you're not getting that, you polarize into the shadow aspects of it. You know, and then you're either you're hyper aroused or hypo. So then that splits into either I'm fight or flight, I'm hyper vigilant, anxious, perfectionist with my diet, or the opposite of the imbalance is to be hypo aroused, where you check out. And then usually the hyper aroused have a proclivity towards anorexia and being underweight, out of the control, and the hypo have the proclivity to be overweight because they're trying to use food to feel grounded.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah,
I'd love to hear more too about the chakras.
Yeah.
I can talk. I used to do that. I used to do it all the time, but I stopped. But I'd love to share more.
By all means.
But the first, and the relationship to the second is the food.
Yeah,
nourishment.
I think that's definitely a good point to bring up. If in your root, if you have no real foundation with your own personal self-respect, self-confidence, self-security, and you don't have that in your environment, I can see how that branches out very negatively with first and foremost, our essentials, which is food and water and oxygen. And if you don't have that good foundation, those good basics set in place, how are you supposed to have anything healthy branch off of that? So that's the basics of our physical world and, you know, how we experience in the physical. So, yeah,
if you're imbalanced in your root, in your first chakra around your nourishment and how you take care of yourself and how you think about yourself and your family, and if you don't feel safe, there's no road to enlightenment, y'all. Like if you can't get past one
first base,
you're very hijacked. And they say that most people in society nowadays are cycling between the first, second, and third chakra system because it's so dense. It's the very dense realms of not feeling safe in matter. This is where you see a lot of people say, like, I don't belong here. I don't feel it. It's because there's a profound disassociation with and trauma from them not feeling safe. And the shadow word of the root chakra is just fear. I don't feel safe. I don't feel nourished. I don't feel safe here. I don't feel safe in my body. So when you're in fear, that really affects many of your body's systems. And then they say that it's the your legs are very affected by root chakra issues. All of your bones, your teeth, you know, your teeth included, but all of your bones are very affected by an unhealthy root chakra. And usually there's just a plethora of continual illness one after the other because again, you just don't feel safe in your own body.
Yeah, it's always about food. It always comes down to fear. I say that all the time. It's about fear, and it doesn't matter what you're calling it. It doesn't matter if you're calling it worry, anxiety, this, that, whatever, blah, blah, blah. It's fear. Dig deeper to the root, to the cause. It is fear. Like, why are you anxious? Why are you Why can't you deal with this emotional problem? Why can't you do this? Why are you worried? Why are you blah, blah, blah? It's fear. It's because you're afraid, or it's because it's based in fear. You don't understand really how to get to that. You just think it's a regular thing. But yeah, you guys are absolutely on point. Excuse me.
I
And
love this
before,
talk.
yeah, this is really turning into a really great episode. So thank you so much, guys. And thank you, Stephanie. And before I just want to go on a little bit more to our next section and how let's get down to, okay, so we understand now, at least to some extent, our spiritual parts of this, the emotional parts, but I want to go over some of the ways that food has been utilized physically in our physical world and almost weaponized in a way where it's being used against us. And I just want to, I'm going to share the screen again. I'll read a little bit more and then we can go through that. Okay. So, can we all see that okay? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'll read a little bit more. The establishment and all entities that are connected to this are a fragmented, broken, and dysfunctional system. Not even one single medical professional seems to be on the same page entirely. People are wondering why they are sick. This is not, and if they've been listening to this whole show, they've got part of the answer. I think this is not a mystery to me. It is blaringly obvious that the only true crisis we have on the planet is a health crisis, and that starts with our food and medicine, not just what we are consuming. I mean, besides the slavery problem, obviously, that's without being said, I think. But not just what we are consuming, but why and how food and medicine should be thought of and taught to be part of the same science. But in today's modern world, they are completely separate from each other. These are some of the things about food that causes issues in our society that I feel is a condition. It's conditioning us to navigate our relationships with food in unhealthy ways and disconnecting us with food in the psychological and emotional and spiritual ways. But it's all subconscious. It's done under the radar, I think. So bleaching food in our culture, yes, some food is naturally white, but it's not, from what I've seen anyway, it's not bleach white. And a lot of our food is bleached and there's a lot of chemicals in our food. So bleaching food like eggs, bleaching bread, bleaching sugar, bleaching all sorts of things. So this puts in chemical components into our biology that forces us to act and behave unnaturally with our relationships with food, how we eat, what we consume, why we're consuming it. I think that has a big something to do with not just bleaching, but things like preservatives, things like in a lot of places, at least in the United States, there is fluoride and even arsenic and other components that's put in our regular drinking water that we're just expected to drink out of the tap. Stuff like that is put into it. And I think because these physical elements that come into our food, this is causing a big problem with it's not just a psychological problem. It's being backed up by a physical interaction with poison food and medicine, with our basic, even with our food, with our water and our bread, like cheap bread. Bread is, unless you're buying expensive bread, you're not necessarily getting real bread. Like get a regular loaf of bread, of white bread, it's probably been bleached a bit, and it might even be like mostly wood chips, like cheap bread. If you look at it on the shelf, like we actually had this happen We had half a loaf of regular low cost bread. We had that on our shelf for 6 months. And then we looked at it one day and we're like, we've had that like half a loaf of bread for a long time. Why is it not rotting or molding or looking weird? So we started looking into that, and we found out that bread is being manufactured with things like wood chips. And wood chips, where we can consume that, has zero nutritional value when you're eating it. So I think there's a big problem as well. It's not just this psychological and spiritual disconnection that's being conditioned into our society, but it's also a problem. It's being backed up by how food is being distributed into our physical world. So it's not just the bleaching, but many things on that. So, and I want to bring up the point of all things that we consume is bad for us if we abuse it. However, the key is moderation, practice self-control. And this is also becoming a problem, which I think is kind of a spiritual problem. It's an emotional problem, which we talked a little bit about. There's no real self-control where there's no respect being given to what our nutrients, what we need, our basic essentials. Nature has everything we would need as far as healthy diet goes, but it takes an individual's personal responsibility in order to create that healthy diet for oneself. Stop leaving it to others to tell you how to take care of your own body, which we did. We've gone over that a little bit as well, and I think is important. Food operates as nourishment, medicine, emotional comfort, ceremonial, traditional, relational experience, and self-care. Why? What is the purpose of this? And we went over this a little bit earlier as well. It does provide all of these things, and it's how we're using them that will dictate whether that transmits into something healthy or unhealthy. So it doesn't matter. I mean, I wouldn't even say it necessarily matters what you're eating. I know people who they can eat lard and tin cans for the entirety of their lives, but their perspective on it and how they emotionally or just take that in and accept it as this is my food. They're not necessarily like, they're living long lives and not necessarily super unhealthy physically. So I think the perspective and the spiritual aspect of that has to come into play. I mean, I think people should take care about what they're consuming. But there's something to say about how you view food as well, and how you view anything that you're consuming. And then food has both positive and negative aspects in our history. It takes, again, personal responsibility to use our discernment and figure out what is healthy and what is unhealthy. And the last thing before we discuss this a little bit, in our ancient world, food was treated with care and how we use it in regards to our lives, and it was with respectful consideration. This means that these people understood that moderation was important. Only the foolish would disrespect their physical bodies by overeating and abusing feel-good food in order to seek pleasure, or filling a void because you're missing something spiritually. This is the only reason people overeat, I feel. The act of overeating and eating for comfort is escapism and an aspect of fear. So just pop out of that real quick. And just going over some of that, I'd like to know what you guys think about any of that information.
Real fast, I wanted to play off what you just said about overeating. Like, I think that overeating is been associated with wealth and with because just to have the option to overeat is a big privilege throughout history. And if you're in the king's, camp, you get to store all the food to make sure you get fed first. That's how it was, I believe, done. So there's this desire to live high on the hog or high off the hog, whatever, and so you can be gluttonous, right? As a sign of your comfort or wealth.
Yep, absolutely. People connect it with wealth. They got a lot of money. They're going to show it off by bringing people together to show off their wealth and how they can lavishly feed whoever their special guests are. And yes, that has been a big thing in our history.
Yeah, even wasting food, right? We're the richest country. How much food we waste,
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Absolutely. And if anybody else wants to go off of that, they got some thoughts, Brittany or Stephanie, or we can move on to the next part, which I think has more history in it.
I'll let you guys go. I always have something to say.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
I just wanted to just add this whole thing around, genetically modified foods, pasteurization, homogenization, like the processing, the extending shelf life with additives. So a lot of that isn't even technically food if you think of it. And no wonder people are also hungry and malnourished. And then that, I think, leads to overeating and attempting to feel full when their body's really not getting what it needs, right? So it becomes very complex.
I agree, and only based on a book that I have on that shelf. I was looking for it over here. It's called Cure Tooth Decay. And they actually talk about they have studies and proof of things that people used to eat long ago. And there were tribes, none of them brushed their teeth, none of them, because that didn't exist. But it actually shows pictures of tribes with perfect teeth, and they ate things like fish head soup. They ate the eyeballs, they ate the organs, and all of these things. And it was the tribes that weren't eating those things that had problems with teeth decay. And those things are very not present in our diets nowadays. So it's just an interesting reflex. I could get up and show pictures if you guys wanted me to. But I just find it very, very fascinating how a lot of our modern meals are void of those forms of nutrition. Now, chicken liver, that's one that I sell at my job. Not my choice, but I would like to learn to eat those things just because I want to give it a shot, but it's not, a French fry or a hamburger or a banana. So it's just something that I found very fascinating is that like organ meat and I guess healthy animal fats are definitely more common than the organ meats, but it's just something very interesting as we look at now and the past.
Yeah. So I think that's really like interesting that you bring that up because it does also highlight, if people are willing to see it, but it highlights the fact that nature does have answers for these things. And I would say in that situation with tribes like that, nature had the solution to say brushing your teeth or keeping your teeth and your gums healthy, which we all require to have healthy bodies. But it took man's intervention to understand that knowledge and how to utilize it properly. So yeah, that's
I just want to add something in real quick, and this is a harsh reality, but one that needs to be said is I'm always reminded of a comment that a very high authority figure in the world of medicine said to me one time. He said, "We only respond to that which you want and that of where you are." So basically, Sarah, when you were reading that stuff and the fact is that factory farming, producing more with less, antibiotics, the mistreatment of the animals, the bleaching, the dyeing, all the things we do to mass produce are because we have people in charge who aren't mentally healthy and putting money and power over health. But also we have a society of people who want convenience. So it's like, again, it's kind of pulling the responsibility back to what this gentleman said in the healthcare field, which I don't want to belong to a society any longer where any convenience I'm indulging in is costing me on many levels. I want to try to help people be aware that we're unhealthy because this is what we want. This is where we're at. The system has had to maladapt to our busyness and the ways in which we've gone unconscious and have not wanted to do it the way we did because we're busier and have more going on and this and that. So it has to be like a reclamation and us saying like, I'm willing to take the responsibility to not have our systems and institution respond to the maladaptations of a busy culture.
Yeah.
Well said. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's all done purposefully to get us to this point where it's now too much of a burden to actually really understand this stuff properly. And I think we're bombarded with all kinds of information that is not necessarily correct information. It's like a mixture of correct information with bad information, and or just even old wives' tales kind of mythology, like what we want to be real, what we want it, how we want it to be. And, and I would agree that in many cases, I think we kind of asked for it. We asked for things to be more convenient and handy for us and easy to deal with. But I think that we're doing that because we have been usurped with our natural society, like the way we would normally operate naturally, we've been usurped. And because everything socially has become this big hectic rat race, now you've got people like, I just don't have time to do things or even care or know or whatever. And I'm just flooded with all kinds of information before I'm ready to really fully take it in. There's no stepping stone progression. Again, there's no comfort space. We don't have
that's like
space.
The challenge, like right now, as we all know, is that publicly in the West, at least, it's like carnival. It's like all the shadow is mixed in with all of the good. And it's like a circus when everybody has the least amount of energy and desire to change their whole life and awaken. This is where we're at. I think this is why society is so dysfunctional, is because it's all out there on the table, all the dysfunction and a little bit of what's right. And we're being asked to change when we're at our most genuine weakness because of the conditioning from the consumerism and the ways in which the system has maladapted to us and the ways in which it lives and thrives off of us being a consumer. So, to me, it feels like the only answer out of this is just one by one, we become self-aware and we awaken and we do the best that we can to demonstrate what that's like, because we created a mega monster. And then we have AI on top of that too. And we have information overload and we have trauma and we're identifying with narratives based off of our trauma. It's like carnival. It's like just a hot mess out there. So it's hard. We have to do the work. We have to do the personal work. And we also have to hold the people accountable, Sarah, who are poisoning our food and who are just these mass industries. But again, there's a power dichotomy there it's a fight. It is a war. Look at what they did to the truckers in Canada because they were trying to. God, so it's so like, wrong. If you're going to stand up, we're going to close your bank accounts down. So this is the fear. We're in the root chakra shadow right now, is if you stand up, we're going to kill you. We're going to take away your money. But we have to do it anyway, because now we're left with no choice.
I love that. And I 100% agree. And sometimes they're two different things, but Sarah, you wrote notes later down in what we've been reading about self-responsibility. I sometimes think, and maybe it's just because of the way things are now, something of like a warrior mentality is very necessary and relevant. As much as I hate war, I don't ever want violence. You know, at some point, as well as in history, people had to be strong and brave and courageous enough to stand up for what they thought was right. And if a number of us are thinking along the same path, like what better way than to unite? But it still kind of comes down to the self, at least on the internal level, because that's the only person we have true control over is ourself. But I think that the more that we take self accountability and responsibility, the better chances are to unite with people and hopefully bring about a change that could be as powerful as everything that has happened thus far.
I agree full-heartedly, and I agree that it's just the way I see it, it's like what I'm viewing from the looking through the shop glass at the stores. Everybody's trying to all at once take in, the analogy with the tree. They're trying to take in the full forest before they understand the tree. And I think it kind of just, it comes back to that personal self. You've got to let's see if you can be responsible for the tree before you can be responsible for the forest. And for the warrior concept, being a warrior doesn't necessarily mean that you're, in war, or it's a battle, or it's like a physical war. Like it's about embodying the self-confidence, I think, the person within, like, what are you going to step up to the plate and actually take responsibility for personally within the individual self. And not doing that. I mean, you could do that for the sake of your countrymen and women, which is sometimes required, I think, to check that shit which might want to usurp us. But you got to have that within yourself, and even just having that mentality within your everyday today stuff. Like, I've got to get up in the morning and brush my teeth and make sure my family's fed and clothed, and do the, all the basic stuff that people don't even realize that's part of you taking in that warrior, that personal warrior within yourself, knowing I'm not just going to roll over and lay down in bed all day in the dark because, fuck that shit. I'm going to actually step up to the plate and do what is actually required for myself, my personal life, and then I'm going to branch out and do what is required in my external environment.
Yeah. Sarah, I just want to say two things real quick to that. One is, you were talking about I forget the terminology you used, but you were saying try to understand the forest between they understand the tree. This is a phenomenon, and this is how the inversion systems work. Is they hijack or pull the carriage before the horse and thing. They hijack ideology without embodying it. That's how inverted systems function. Is they have the cognitive knowledge, but they don't have process. That's the feminine. So they try to come up with a solution without embodying process. And the last thing I just wanted to say was about the warrior and the female warrior, is that God bless their soul, beautiful gentlemen in our community who we talk about the sacred masculine and the feminine, and the feminine should be able to be subservient to the masculine and sit back in her feminine. This is not the world that we live in. We do not live in a world where a feminine can just sit back in her feminine and receive from a masculine. This is not the time. This is not the historical time to do that. Maybe in a relationship, You can at times sit back and let your masculine lead. I think the critical part of this, though, is understanding that the sacred warrior for the feminine, the Joan of Arc archetype, has, remember, there's a light and there's a shadow. So it's, I'm not in my warrior-esque energy because I'm defensive and trying to be manipulative because I don't have my basic needs met, and I'm a boss bitch now because I got to be a warrior in this life.
Unhealthy feminine.
That's a very different feminine energy than the true Joan of Arc energy, which is I embody love and wisdom, and I take action based off of love, not my ego and my unmet needs. So this is, again, I think culturally we're trying to heal wounds of masculine and feminine, and trying to understand the highest feminine role is to be able to receive and be receptive, but also having the perspective that this is not the time for anybody to sit back and do nothing.
It requires action. And we women are capable of action just as well as any man, as you know, just like men can receive like that feminine energy like women are. But we all have, like, I think, roles that we're meant to be playing. And
think about Helen of Troy. She could move 1,000 ships with the glance of her eyes. So the sacred feminine, I think, like you said, Sarah, it's the role that she plays in her action. She's not out there necessarily battling like the guys, but she has integrated herself to the point where she can make action happen by her just showing up in full presence. So that to me feels like the female warrior.
Right.
Thanks for those historical references.
Yeah.
I've been feeling drawn there too.
Yeah. And it's a good, this is why I feel like history is so important to understand. And even if you're reading things that are, you know, classified as mythology or legend or whatever, there's basis of truth in this. There's lessons to be learned. And a lot of, you know, even our mythology, like even like the Grimm's fairy tales, those are fictional children's story tales. That being said, they were written in a way to impart very specific type of lessons. That's what they were for in that time period. So like when you're talking about people like Helen of Troy, people like Joan of Arc, people like this, they are the muse behind the actual physical action. They are creating action by being the force of action behind the action, if that makes sense.
Like the power behind the strength of the masculine.
Right. They're inspiring it.
Yeah, she initiates cultural revolution, and then he stands for it. So again, I think that our men we're working on this sacred feminine and masculine energy need to be able to distinguish that difference. You know, so women need, we've earned the right, and it's our natural right to be able to take action. It's where is that action deeply coming from within you? What is the intention behind your action that I think makes a difference?
Yeah. Where is our action really going to matter the most? Yeah. And like even the women who were in the Revolutionary War, most people think the people who took part in the Revolutionary War and fought for our freedom in that time period, they see it as like all of our founding fathers, all of the men that were involved. But there were women involved as well, and they sat behind the men and they supported the men, and they gave their men, this is what we want. We're part of a team. We're part of the same unit. I will support this, and I will do what I have to do to make it happen for our world and for you, and I will support you in what we're doing.
I have a good example of that, if I can share it, because I've been studying some of my family history, and I can trace back one line to a lieutenant in the Revolutionary War, and he and his family lived on the frontier in New York State, and so he was off, doing different things, and there was a fort where his wife held the fort, and was there managing the store for, the community of people that lived there that they were protecting, and managing kind of loans and money and credit and whatever. And so she was a leader, in that role, as, her husband was off being a lieutenant here and there doing this and that. So there was very much like a role for everyone. And I was reading a bit or listening to podcasts on the Vikings, and women, like there were women, shield maidens, women warriors physically on the field, but that was probably the minority. But there were women who accompanied the men, and they were the ones that were like, seamstresses and providing their clothing and the materials. And, there was a very active and vital role that they played. It was also required a lot of courage and ability to self-protect, and while probably, taking care of kids or so on. So it's like that whole division, if you want to call it like a division of labor, has been totally warped or inverted as something bad, when it's really not, but that's like a whole nother podcast, I think.
But yeah, you're right. And that's, if people were paying attention to history, they would understand that during these, like the time I think we're in now, we're in a very turbulent era of human history. Once again, they would understand, if they understood history, that there are roles that everybody plays that fits their personal dynamics, their personal selves. And even no matter, if you agree with the cause or whatever, you have troops of army people, or, bandits, or, whatever. Maybe it's they're marching off to war for some religion because whatever. On, like, putting that part aside, in all of those campaigns that people have done for various reasons, there's always women somewhere involved in that. Like, and you'd have if it's a small troop, it'd be one or two women, and they're cooking and cleaning and sewing and fixing and mending, and they're doing all the shit that, men are not necessarily, that they didn't put their energy into knowing how to do. And there's that backup for that action. And I feel like that backup that we have done, that we have given in our history, that is our action. And yes, there's the minority where I'm not saying a woman can't pick up a sword or a gun or whatever, and, tell somebody what time it is. But our backup in how we want our world to be, how we want it to be, that's where our most important roles come in, I feel. And us doing a show like this and talking about this kind of information, this is us supporting, this is us putting up the support beams for the call to action. This is us going, yes, we support these things because this is what we know is, it's good for ourselves, it's good for our families, it's good for our humanity, it's good for, the sanctity of freedom on this planet, and for the people we want to see be happy and healthy and free. And so I feel like shows like doing something like this with us ladies is really needed. That's why I wanted to do something like this, and really bring in the women who, they want to support it, they want to back it up, but maybe they just don't feel like they can't be like, we're men, God love them. They have the ability to be assertive, firm, to the point, bam, 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 and they can make it happen in that way. And women can do that too. That being said, it's important for all of us to have that backup and that support. This guy back here. So I feel like we play a good vital role, and I do consider that action and not just the psychological or emotional side of it. I consider us, when we enact that kind of stuff, we're enacting action.
You know, in the Bible, in the Hebrew Bible, I love this. Eve translates as Adam's beneficial adversary. So basically, it means that she's there, but she's going to give him a different perspective. She's going to be there as an equal counterpart, but she has this role. Literally in Hebrew, Eve translates as beneficial adversary. So she's like, I'm here for you. I got you, but I am seeing different things that you're not seeing, and I have a different role, and together our energies create a whole. So I think that's really beautiful because, again, humans throughout history have vastly misrepresented these energies, and we think Eve is suppressed and Lilith is the real, like, there's a lot we don't know, you know, but I just thought that was so beautiful and made the most sense to me because it shows that we're equal, but for different divine purposes.
I love that. And actually, I read in the last year, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And he mentioned that women can do the same thing, but a lot of his studies that he did were on men. And he said behind every great man is a woman. All of these men who sought to grow themselves, they had a woman next to them who inspired them forward. And I agree that both are necessary, both are needed, and we all have our roles and ability to support one another in healthy ways.
It's like helping the man to give birth to his aim, you know, to his purpose.
Yeah.
Two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. As long as we can keep women healed and feeling safe enough to keep those aims pointed towards wholeness and not selfishness. That's where, like, that manipulative woman is like, I want you to do this because then I will have more and I will be more powerful. And, you know, it's that service to other mentality. And that requires, again, us to do the work to find that safety that resides within us first, because nobody is really going to make us feel. If you have a woman who doesn't feel safe within herself, a millionaire can come along to perceivably make her feel comfortable or safe. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be enough.
Yeah.
It's never going to be enough. So we have to do it first within.
Yeah, exactly.
And if a woman attaches to a man who, for wealth, you know, if her motivation is to be comfortable, but it's an immoral mission that he's on, so to speak, you know, a woman needs to be aware of how she's helping to birth that immorality as well, or that darkness. So, you know, women have power. And so if we can use our care to guide what we put our love into and our energy, you know, so to speak, you know, to help birth good, I think that we have a lot of power.
Yeah, I think that's one of the greatest forces we're fighting against right now, actually, is the dark feminine. I think it's we're blaming men too much on their inability to act or their imbalance, but I think that actually is rooted in an unhealthy feminine energy.
Yeah.
And that they're reacting and acting out externally, because that's what the masculine does, from this relationship of the dysfunction of the feminine's inner world, that dysfunction. So I think we're facing a crisis of the effects of the dark feminine on the masculine.
I agree. I think feminism could be a very interesting topic to cover because I'm sorry about my rooster if you guys can hear him. I don't know how well the mic is, but he's like we live in a trailer. He's like right there crowing. But
like roosters.
You know, feminism started by wanting women to have legal rights, and I don't think anything's wrong with that, but I think that as it's progressed, it's just really turned into like men hating and trash talking and just that really unhealthy expression of the feminine energy. And it's something that I've been really, really concerned with because the future, I would love it to be as bright as it can be. And the more unhealthy people in general are, the harder that's going to be to achieve. So
yeah, it's toxic. It's toxic feminism now, and it's just difficult to even deal with.
You know, this is it. Is that dark feminine energy will kill you. It will make you unhealthy, and that's why so many men are afraid. They're afraid of that dark feminine because it literally is like a demon. It's so toxic, it will kill you. It will give you a heart attack. It will stroke you out. Like it will. So it is a powerful force. So any woman or man that comes in contact with that energy needs to be strong enough to be able to properly channel that energy. And some people are good at doing that, and other people, you have to, I guess from working in the field that I'm in, like I do get a taste of this energy, and it has an immense amount of power, and it's the power that's running the world right now in its inverted state.
Yeah. And I think that part of that dark feminism, that toxic feminism that you guys are talking about, the biggest thing I see that is a kind of across the board the same with this, with how women are behaving in this feminist ideology, I'd say phony feminist ideology, is that it's this mentality that it's me complex. It is I gotta make sure that I'm sorted out. It's got to be me sorted out first before everybody else. And this is causing a severe issue, I think, with people and their balance. And I would suggest that instead of people thinking in that kind of way, they think, well, if you flourish, then I flourish. And this is going to help to realign some of that balance in a better way.
Yeah, that issue with that dark feminine is that she's an abyss. She's an abyss, and she needs to loosh endless energy because she is a black hole.
Like a parasite.
So she's a black hole. Right. Yeah. So you're right, Sarah. I don't know what this parasite, I don't know if it needs to die. It's not up to me to how that's going to go down. But we do need to incentivize win-win, not game theory for everything. Not like I get more, you get less.
Right,
and that's the way it needs to be because I'm important.
It's happening not just with the feminists, but in other minority circles, that same dynamic of looshing energy. And I think it's like vital for people to wake up to that, turn the tide of what's going on. And
you will get powerful by looshing energy. Yeah. You will gain power, but at the expense of destroying many people. So it's a very deeply subconscious thing. But yeah, we have to incentivize win-win, like Sarah said. Like like it's better if we do this for both of us, But that means
symbiotic.
That
all of us.
Once you have power, though, you don't want to relinquish it.
Well,
you will do everything to exactly. So is it that we're going to have to step up at war and take back the ring, or is there going to find a way? Is that energy going to soften and come to grips with having a little less and feeling like I don't know how this story's going to go, but that's what it seems like, where we're at. It's a powerful force.
And I'm going to have to go soon, but I just wanted to say a couple things before I sign off. It was this idea of, we're all facing crossroads, in all these matters that we're talking about today, from our food choices to our, whatever choices we're making, right? And these crossroads are really important. I feel like the karmic rope is getting shorter and shorter in a way, and that, what we do does matter, and that there's a context that you guys have brought up about the time we live in now and what's being called for, and that we're all needed. And so I think we need to really decide what our priorities are, and also how to keep that warrior spirit present, right? Because in the context we're in, we all need to have that awareness and that spirit, which will include some discipline and some readiness for some uncertainties, and taking care of our health and coming back to basics and building knowledge, having that win-win attitude are all really important, I think, and really deciphering between our fantasies and the reality. And there are sacrifices of some sort that are, going to be apart, we're going to have to make some choices, right? Between some things, at least temporarily, I think, and so, really, I think doing deep contemplation on all this stuff we've talked about, will help people to sort of establish, I think, get a little closer, I guess, to what is important, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks,
And
Leslie.
yeah, on the note, yeah, we've had such a great
I know,
session.
such a good talk.
2.5 hours might be our longest
Wow.
session, but I we can go ahead and wrap up for today as well. And if you guys have some final thoughts, don't feel shy. You could plug your work. And this video, I want to thank everybody who came to watch, who's watching. And this video is going to be put out soon, and it'll be up on Rumble, Odyssey, Substack. It'll be wherever we decide to put it, and share it. And but to wrap up, if anybody has some final thoughts or anything that they would want to, like, just tell people where they can find more about your work and more about the stuff that you do.
Go ahead, Leslie. Because I think you have to go, right?
Yeah, I got to head out. So I just put together a tap link, which now I've decided is the easiest way, but to find it, where you get my tap link. Well, so I have if you're on Facebook, I have a page there called Alive and Thrive with Leslie Powers, and then my just personal page. And I'm starting to build up that Live and Thrive page, but I have my tap link there. YouTube under Leslie Powers, Odyssey. I'm building up a Rumble and a BitChute channel. And then, of course, Dissolving the Divide is where a lot of the interviews are that I have on the One Great Work Network, which is probably the most comprehensive of most everything. And then AliveThrive.life is my website. So you can check out any of that. It's building and growing and evolving, and it's kind of exciting and scary too. So. All right, guys, it's really wonderful to meet with you, all of you. I really love the opportunity, and I'm always grateful to you, Sarah, for initiating this and leading this process for us, or facilitating it. I feel like there is a different energy that comes with women talking, and I really like it a lot.
Me too.
I find it very valuable. So
I do too.
yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Leslie.
I'll see y'all later.
Thank you, Leslie.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us, Steph. Bye.
Oh, no, my pleasure. Go ahead, Brittany.
Okay. I've mostly just been on Facebook, but honestly, withdrawing from that. I have a YouTube channel called Home and Haven Farms. You can go to linktree.com/Home and Haven Farms if anybody wanted to donate, but I'll probably start refilming stuff in about a year is our goal. So we're saving to build an arched cabin. And we just have a small family farm, bunch of chickens, sheep, pigs, dogs, cats. We'll have turkeys again. Let's see. I'm a co-author of the Anarchist Cookbook 2.0. So if you go to Linktree/Anarchist Cookbook 2, you can find us there, or even Linktree. I'm just doing the Linktrees because it's kind of one spot shop for everything. And then just Linktree/Brittany Ashby, just like how it's spelled right there. You could find all of those links there. And then you can find me on here, the Girls Club. So Substack, Rumble, and then Odyssey, and we post on Facebook too. Your turn, Stephanie.
The last thing I want to say is to parlay off of what you said, Sarah, is I think right now, if you haven't already, reevaluate your values and make them simple and make them accessible, and just start there. Just like start over if you have to start over, and couple values, try to accomplish that, and start this time from a healthier, conscious foundation. So that's at least what I'm trying to do. And I'm a little bit all over the place, so you can really go almost anywhere and find me under my name, Stephanie Mo Davis. My website is stephaniemodavis.com. And then I have other stuff I'm involved with, but you can find most of it on my website. So keep it nice and easy. Thanks, Sarah, so much for having us. This was a nice talk with the ladies.
Yeah, thank you
Absolutely.
for coming, and I'm so happy with the turnout. With every episode, I'm always so happy and grateful. Good. And thank you so much, Stephanie, for coming and joining us with today's talk about generating a healthy relationship with food. And everything that comes with it, because there's so much more that comes with it. So, and for myself, you can, people who see this, I'm on Rumble, Odyssey, and Substack. But I have a link tree, and go to linktree.com/SarahCrossArt. You can find all the things I got my hands in, including my sewing channels that I do for free. And and to anybody listening, all this work comes from, it's all volunteer work. We do this because it is required. And any type of support, even sharing this video, sharing our link tree, sharing our websites, watching the videos, letting people know that people like us exist and that we're on their side, and we're part of your community as much as you're part of our community, and we only want the best for each other. And so I feel like if we come together and support, and if you can throw a couple of bucks here and there to anybody, including Leslie's donation platforms, that all goes towards this effort and allowing us to keep doing it. So thanks again, guys. I think you're awesome. And you too, Leslie. I think you're awesome. I love you guys. And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye. Lovely meeting you, Stephanie.
You too, Brittany. Take care. Thanks. Bye, Sarah.
Bye, Sarah.
Bye.